CVS Caremark is restoring coverage of Zepbound, reversing a formulary decision from last summer that saved employers money but prompted patient anger and a class action lawsuit. It's a useful window into how GLP-1 coverage is decided. We're going to also talk about the compounding market, the rise of microdosing, and the latest clinical research on GLP-1s in cancer, long COVID, and beyond. Welcome to CareTalk, America's home for incisive debate about healthcare business and policy. I'm David Williams, president of Health Business Group.
And I'm John Driscoll, the chairman of UConn Health. David, this is a great topic. Everybody's taking these drugs, and they seem to be miracle drugs. How could CVS Caremark have the chutzpah to actually say no when the rest of America and apparently the clinical establishment is saying yes?
Well, John, I didn't know if you're going to go with Yiddish. I thought maybe say temerity. There's a lot of words that, it could be done there. I mean, what happens, I think, is that on the one hand, these drugs are great. On the other hand, you're supposed to be managing the pharmacy benefit, which means not just saying yes to everything and paying all this money. And so they said, hey, you got drugs that work.
You got a PBM. It isn't about saying no to everything either. I mean, come on, man.
It isn't. So how could they do it? I mean, I think what happened is you had two drugs that were really great, and they saw a big financial opportunity, and they said, let's actually go for it. It was a little bit of a head scratcher for me, John, even at the time that they did it.
An expert like you?
Yeah, because they don't usually like to say no, like you said, especially if because there are differences between the products. But
aren't they all the same?
I'm not a physician. But no, they show different. They show different results in trials, and when
based
people are
on the doctors who we do consult, what's interesting about the GLP-1s as a category is they do appear to have, although generally the same opportunities for weight reduction and all the other corollary stuff that appears to be going well, and some of the similar clinical challenges that they do seem to the different chemical composition appears to have slightly different results. But as a category, Dave, wasn't the miss here that they didn't embrace it? Because gosh, these seems to be pretty remarkable drugs.
I don't know, John. So, I mean, I actually let's dwell on the financial aspect a little bit more, because the other thing that we're seeing is whether, people bring on coverage because it seems like, well, it's a drug that's going to help somebody, and it's also maybe going to save money and even in the near term. But then on the other hand, you see a lot of employers that are dropping coverage and health plans because they can't afford it. And I'm assuming that what happened was CVS was trying to say, hey, employers, keep it on your formulary. Keep a GLP-1 on your formulary, but we're going to do something where we're going to get you a good value and you're going to be able to afford to do that. I mean, I do think it is between.
Let's give the PBMs some credit here. The GLP-1 manufacturers, Lilly, Novo Nordisk, they were jamming people on price. I mean, they were clearly charging an extortionate amount initially. What you could see, because they immediately were charging 70 to 80% less in like Europe. So you fly to London, you can pay for your Zepbound prescription a few times over. And so it punched a hole in the budget. Budgets for pharmaceuticals and healthcare are set a year before. That's when people underwrite. And so when you have this hugely popular drug that is very expensive and it's being relentlessly, marketed by dancing people on TV, that there would be a fear that it would be a budget buster, and so you got to give them some credit. But we don't know yet. At least last year, this is happening all in real time, that the prices would come down and the implications would be great. But why? What else is behind that decision for CVS Caremark, and what's the state of play right now?
Well, it sounded like there's actually, a lawsuit that was alleging that there were ERISA violations, so people's rights are being affected. So I think that is probably a good reason for them to reverse course on that. And it's also just, you can't.
Just contextually for folks, Most larger employers are self-insured. They're covered under ERISA, which is the federal exemption from local state insurance regulations, because most health insurance policies are regulated on a state basis. But for the large multi-state employers, there's something called an ERISA exemption, and they're covered under a different category. However, that the assumption is if you're paying a ton of money for health insurance, which everybody does, both the combination of out-of-pocket and the employer, that those health policies would promote your health, and the drugs that you would expect or that your doctor and others are prescribing would be covered as part of the health insurance that you're paid for. And so that's, I think, the basis of what that lawsuit was all about.
I think there's a fascinating, I mean, as fascinating as these drugs are in their clinical impact, it's fascinating what's going on the business side, because you've got the typical dynamics here, let's say between the PBMs, the employers, the drug companies. Then you've also got the substantial consumer program, because you've got the compounded drugs that people have essentially just been shopping for on their own.
What do you mean compounded drugs?
Well, what I mean is that there are pharmacies that are allowed to actually make the equivalent product in certain circumstances. And the circumstance here was there was a shortage of these name brand products initially.
They're insanely popular.
Yeah, exactly.
Cardiometabolic disease, basically being overweight, morbidly overweight in a way that affects your heart, your kidneys, your whole system, cardiometabolic syndrome. The potential for diabetes, which is overwhelming. We've never seen diabetes in such a large swath of the population, even getting down to kids. It used to be a disease of older people, uncontrolled sugar, too much food, leading to, major weight gain and general. I mean, that's why these drugs were designed, and they seem to work. They have remarkably consistent weight loss results. I mean, this and they were very popular.
Absolutely, John. And unlike some expensive products that are out there, these drugs are not actually expensive or complicated to manufacture. And so a compounder can basically get the raw ingredients and put something together that's similar. And when there was a shortage, they were allowed to do so. And so they built up a big business there. And then the shortage was declared over.
So context here, then the inputs are cheap. The price ceiling that Lilly and Novo, the branded manufacturers, was very high. So these compounders, which is just a weird way of thinking, but think of it, the mortar and pestle that you'd see as a sign of people grinding things up and creating drugs, which hasn't been true probably since the time of the Greeks in terms of the way, but is the sign of compounding, became super popular, and then there was a lot of direct to consumer advertising because the compounders figured out that the big brand folks were having a lot of fun with the all that direct to consumer advertising with cute ditties and people dancing and music seemed to really work. So they got into the game as well. And the compounding business exploded as well, because these drugs are, although there's a very high rate of people who quit using them, for the people for whom could tolerate it, they've been in transformational in terms of people's health.
So here's a weird thing that happened, John. So once the shortage period ended and FDA declared, it's not a shortage anymore, you can't make these products, the prescriptions for the compounded versions actually went up. And so IQVIA showed, so the shortage period ended in February of 2025, but then data from October 2025 shows that actually the number of prescriptions went up. And it's basically because it was affordable for people, and the compounders didn't want to get out of this business, any too quickly. And they did a few things like make a dose that isn't exactly available, or put vitamin B in it to say it's actually a different product. And it's basically been tough to shut down. So it's still out there.
Beneficial for the compounders.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of action going on that side. So all right, so now there's another thing, John, that's this microdosing trend.
You should not be dispensing medical advice, David.
I'm not, but people are saying, okay, well, let's do a microdose. Now, I wish I could do.
Let's say, but step back a little bit. What's the difference between a microdose, a normal dose, and a macrodose?
The microdose is very small. So the idea is that you say, hey, maybe, and this has been true in other things, like this is some, homeopathic people try to do this, which is say, I'm just going to take like a little tiny amount of something and it's going to have the effect. Now, John, I love the idea of microdosing, and I tried with my, the price of gas has gone up. So I have a kind of gas guzzler, and I tried to microdose it, and it stopped on the side of the road. But basically, what I'm suggesting is that there's all sorts of things going on between social media, compounders, et cetera, that it's making this a weird type of a market, which also can mean that people aren't necessarily getting the benefits, the products that they might otherwise.
I'm not sure that's fair, David. I mean, if you look at the number of clinical categories, so the clinical data would suggest that in addition to weight loss, which is good, once you hold that outside of the results, the cardioprotective aspect of this, with heart disease being the leading killer of Americans, I believe, still over cancer and accidental death, that appear to be very strong. There appear to be an anti-addictive element to the GLP-1s, the use of those the peptides that may be tied to the blood-brain, the brain-gut connection, but we're not quite sure. But there appears to be some very early promising research there. The most interesting stuff I saw recently was TBI, brain and concussion. There appears to be some early stuff there. These drugs that have a category of potentially better effects that are growing the more we do research on people who've taken them and can tolerate them. So I'm pretty excited about this category. And I wouldn't be. You sound a little skeptical of the microdosing, but I don't think I've seen a drug introduced for one thing that has had one indication or a clinical impact that has had so many other positive clinical possibilities and indication in such a short period of time.
John, the way I look at it is there's all sorts of potential for these products, and they're being studied in those areas. We don't know where they go, and there's a danger of people just sort of jumping into that. And so I'll just mention some of the things that, as you say, there's many positive things and where it's being looked at. I'll just mention some of the areas where there's been some concerns that have come up. So there's some studies that have flagged some psychiatric issues in terms of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. There's concern about people who, let's say, have an eating disorder who may be taking these products. GI, we know there's GI side effects. There's some studies showing some GI risks.
For a subset of people, a pretty substantial subset, I think 50% of the people who try these drugs historically have dropped them within 6 months, I believe. It's unclear how much of that was tied to the extraordinary expense or the difficulty in getting access to it. But there's a fair amount of data that would suggest that for the current chemical formulations of the GLP-1s, compounders included, that some people it's just really hard for them their gut to kind of handle that in combination. But I think, gosh, for the scale of both on-label and off-label, where people, to your point, are using it for stuff that may not be initially indicated, morbidly obese, weight loss, cardioprotective, that for the scale of this, you're not hearing the kinds of things most other weight loss drugs, miracle weight loss drugs, fen, they caused, they did cause weight loss, and they caused a lot of other healthcare problems. This is the first one where it's creating weight loss, substantial and consistent weight loss, but there appear to be a lot of other positives. And then the other thing, David, is that there's an entire wave of GLP-1s that are like drugs formulated in different ways to solve for some of the challenges of the current formulation. I think it's pretty exciting. You're sitting there thinking about all the things that could go wrong. I don't know. This is one of those things where I think Big Pharma may have gotten it right in a bigger way than we even realized.
I think so. You see a lot of activity and the business development side from those companies that have not been involved. So Lilly and Novo have been the first ones in, but everybody else is looking to get in and look for some improvements and things. I have a lot of optimism about it, John. I just think it's prudent to be careful about it. Another area, though, I'll give you on the positive potential side is a topic that we've actually discussed a lot on this show related to COVID, and in particular, long COVID. As you recall, we've had Zeke Emanuel on, really looking to say, well, there's a lot of people, maybe 20% of people that had COVID that have some sort of long COVID, and there has not been necessarily that much to do about it. And we talked about this could actually be the big impact of COVID. So it would be interesting to look at this from a long COVID standpoint, which hasn't been such an exciting field clinically, but it impacts a lot of people. There is a NIH Recover initiative, and GLP-1s are one of the initial agents that they are moving toward, enrolling in trials and starting actually this summer.
And okay, so are you really more of an optimist about these drugs than I realized? Perhaps I've mislabeled you as a skeptic.
What I think that we're qualified to comment on is the business side of it, which I find fascinating, and then also the potential that they have for a lot of different indications and possibilities. And yes, I do find it very interesting and exciting, but I don't want to get ahead of the trials.
I think the thing that's going to be tricky is these are expensive drugs even at the current reduced cost, and the scale of the utilization is still growing, to your point. So it's going to be a challenge unless people can see a relatively short-term ROI. But I think where you can get dramatic and sustained weight loss, I think you're going to see that, Dave. I mean, I'm a positive on this one. I do think that the thing that's most exciting is you're going to see, because of the success, a lot of research and money go towards seeing whether this similar formulation can be tuned to solve other problems.
John, let's stick for one more minute on the weight loss side of it. And we hear a lot about the GLP-1 rebound rate. There was a study that showed about 60% of weight loss that was gained during treatments was regained within a year after stopping. What are you seeing there?
Well, I think that the current approach here has been very pharma-led, which is, okay, we've got a great drug. We're going to charge you a lot of money. It's going to create a lot of value. It's on it forever. Not a problem for us. It's a problem for you as an employer, as a patient. I think you're starting to see employers work with businesses like my wife's, food is medicine business, NourishedRx, where you combine it with a behavioral intervention and teaching people how to cook, how to engage in food in a different way. And with that, I think you could see if you can get that behavior change and teach people how to interact with the food system in their own, their own urges. That could have a really dramatic positive effect. And the great thing about a GLP-1 as an integrated therapeutic is it you can have an immediate lift often, or reduction in weight loss. Now, I think the tricky thing here is, and I'm even having a hard time myself, not being too optimistic, just because I've even read that there is some potential cancer reduction possibility.
Yes, that's been what's happened has been noticed that yes, there have been some some real world data that GLP-1s may reduce cancer progression. This is actually very current, the 2026 ASCO annual meeting showing GLP-1s could reduce cancer progression in lung, breast, colorectal, and liver by a substantial amount, and that it correlates in lower mortality risk. So there's a lot of interesting and positive signals that are out there. Yes.
And so where do you land, Dave, from a business perspective? Do you think these GLP-1s are going to continue to go down in price and become more accessible?
Yeah, I think that the market is going to grow overall and that you're going to see more uses. You're going to see some tuning of GLP-1s, some connection with their lifestyle programs. I mentioned we have another guest, a client of ours, Diasome. They're have a program to help make GLP-1s more tolerable, so that people actually will stay on them and not have so many. That this is still early stage, but
failure rate or people just quitting it within a year is not a great answer for something you're.
I know, but the thing is, John,
that's a really important investment on their part.
No, it is. But it's also interesting. So let's look at these two things, like the GLP-1 rebound rate. So people regain 60% of the weight. But the thing is, for most diets, most people regain all the weight and sometimes more.
True.
And it's also, when people win the lottery, they end up poorer. And also, even for drugs for like hypertension, I think comparably people go off those. And even when people are treating like breast cancer and they have follow-up treatment, people stop taking their drugs. So I'm not sure. I know these numbers are cited. I'm not sure the drop-off rate is so much more dramatic for GLP-1s than others.
Interesting. That's a fair point. So, David, lightning round. Where are we on Medicare and Medicaid? 50% of all the dollars in America, so many people. Where are we on the big government programs in terms of coverage? And then let's talk a little bit about where we're going from here.
So on the Medicare and Medicaid side, of course, a lot of the discussion has been around people that are working age or employed, but most people actually get their coverage from Medicare and Medicaid. Now, of course, I'll tell you that the Biden administration actually had a proposed rule to cover GLP-1s for obesity and Medicare, and so of course, dump that and propose something similar. So basically, tried to have some kind of improvement with a RX program. And now they came up with this balance model, which was to expand access in Medicare Part D and Medicaid, but the health insurers didn't go along with it. So now there's this thing, the Medicare GLP-1 bridge, which is going to cover these drugs starting in July through the end of 2027, with Medicare footing the bill. Only 13 states are covering, in Medicaid, only 13 states cover GLP-1s for obesity, and that's actually down from 16 a year ago. So basically the story is Biden set things out in a direction of coverage, undid it, and trying to now redo it.
I mean, my read of the current news, Dave, is that they're going to find a way to make it work for Medicare, at least partially because the president keeps talking about it as a positive, which is, generally what drives things in the administration. So, Dave, where do we go from here? I mean, I think we're at the beginning of a really interesting phase of this category of drugs. But you're the one who knows a lot more about prescription drugs than I do.
All right, so I'll give the real big picture. The real big picture, and John, thanks for puffing me up, But
low bar.
Big picture, John, is if we look at the public health trends over the past 50 years, they've been bad, right? All the states have gotten worse in terms of the rate of obese and overweight. And actually, we're starting to see that change a little bit. So that's actually, for the first time, that's changing. Then we have these other things where you've got cancer, heart disease, which have really been pretty difficult to do anything about. And those may start to have an improvement as well. And then even some of these things we talk about, deaths of despair, psychiatric problems, mental health in general. And maybe there's a chance actually to turn the ship. So that's the macro side of it with GLP-1s. Maybe that will work in terms of public health, and maybe it's really going to pay off from a cost standpoint, regardless of what happens with pricing, which is just one part
You're
of it.
You're a big maybe here. I'm a more positive. I'm gonna with less information. I want to be more positive here, Dave.
All right. I thought I was being pretty positive, John. That's about as positive as I get. Maybe I need to macro dose myself so that I would be able to give something more positive for next time. Well, what I am going to say, John, is that's it for another episode of Care Talk. We've been talking about the current state of the GLP-1 drug business, science, policy, and why John is so optimistic, even when his co-host is less so. I'm David Williams, president of Health Business Group.
And I'm John Driscoll, the chairman of UConn Health. If you liked what you heard, or you didn't, or you've got questions, we'd like you all to subscribe on your favorite service.